Dr. Zexhai had spent 3 decades studying the galaxy's most feared predator species. The Vorthak with their razor claws, the Grim Hunters with their acidic saliva, the Shadow Stalkers who could phase through solid matter. Yet none of them had prepared him for the moment he first encountered humanity's wrath. The research station orbiting Kepler 442b hummed with quiet efficiency as Zexhai reviewed the latest data streams from Earth's recent conflict with the Hegemony Coalition. His 4 eyes moved independently across multiple holographic displays, each showing different aspects of human military engagement. The battles had been swift, decisive, and absolutely terrifying to witness. Computer, replay engagement sequence 447 Alpha, Zexhai commanded in his native tongue, his translator converting the clicks and whistles into standard galactic common. The hologram flickered to life, showing a human fleet of merely 12 vessels facing off against a hegemony armada of over 200 ships. The size difference was laughable. The hegemony had brought enough firepower to glass 3 planets, while the humans appeared to have arrived with what could charitably be called a patrol group. Zexhai had initially assumed this would be a massacre worthy of study, only for its brevity. The hegemony forces opened fire first, their plasma cannons turning space into a light show of destruction. But then something extraordinary happened. The human ships didn't scatter or attempt to flee. Instead, they moved with a coordination that seemed almost telepathic. The first human vessel, a sleek destroyer called the Retribution, dove directly into the center of the enemy formation. Its weapons weren't the largest Zexhai had seen, but they fired with a precision that defied explanation. Each shot found its mark with surgical accuracy, targeting not the heavily armored hulls of enemy ships but specific systems. Shield generators, weapon arrays, engine clusters. Within minutes, the hegemony's numerical advantage began to crumble. Ships found themselves dead in space. Weapons offline, shields collapsed. But the humans weren't destroying them, not yet. They were systematically dismantling the fleet's ability to fight back, like a predator toying with wounded prey. Zexhai's research assistant, a young Veltari named Kess, entered the observation chamber carrying a steaming cup of the bitter brew that kept Zexhai alert during long research sessions. "Professor, the preliminary reports from the ground engagement on Kepler 442b have arrived." "Ah, excellent timing," Zexhai replied, accepting the drink gratefully. "What did our sensors detect?" Kess activated her personal data pad, her tentacles dancing across the surface with practiced ease. The human forces landed with approximately 5,000 troops. They faced a hegemony garrison of 30,000, including mechanized armor divisions and air support. And the outcome? Total human victory within 18 hours. Hegemony casualties, 0 dead, approximately 15,000 wounded requiring medical attention. Human casualties, 3 injured, none fatal. Zexhai nearly dropped his cup. "That's impossible. Run those numbers again. I've verified them 3 times, Professor." The humans somehow managed to defeat a force 6 times their size while inflicting 0 fatalities. "Our long-range sensors detected the use of non-lethal weapons almost exclusively. Stun rounds, electromagnetic pulse devices, some kind of gas that induced temporary paralysis." The old xenobiologist leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This contradicted everything he thought he knew about human warfare. The galaxy's databases were filled with stories of human fury, their legendary berserker rage that could drive them to fight impossible odds. He'd studied the Battle of Thermopylae, the last stand at the Alamo, the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Humans were supposed to be creatures of passion and violence when cornered. "Computer, cross-reference this engagement data with previous human military actions over the past 50 years. Zexhai commanded. The holographic displays shifted, showing battle after battle, conflict after conflict. As the data compiled, a disturbing pattern emerged. In every single engagement where humans held a significant tactical advantage, their casualty rates among enemy forces dropped dramatically. It was as if their capacity for mercy increased proportionally with their ability to inflict damage. "This makes no sense," Zexhai muttered, his 4 eyes narrowing to focus on a particularly puzzling data point. During the siege of Proxima Station, human forces had the opportunity to destroy a raider fleet that had been terrorizing civilian shipping lanes for months. Instead, they had disabled every ship, captured the crews alive, and even provided medical aid to wounded prisoners. Cass moved closer to examine the displays. Professor, what if we've been approaching this wrong? What if human fury isn't their most dangerous trait? What do you mean? Look at this pattern. The angrier humans become, the more methodical they get. They don't lose control, they gain it. Their fury makes them more precise, not more reckless. They calculate exactly how much force is needed to achieve their objectives, and they never use more than necessary. HFY felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. He'd spent his entire career studying predators, and he recognized efficiency when he saw it. But this was something else entirely. This was the behavior of a species that had evolved beyond simple predation into something far more sophisticated. Computer, display human medical intervention statistics during military operations. The new data was even more unsettling. Human forces routinely carried medical supplies sufficient to treat not only their own wounded, but enemy casualties as well. They had developed non-lethal weapons that could incapacitate entire armies without permanent harm. Their interrogation techniques were so refined that they could extract information without causing psychological damage. They're not just warriors, HFY whispered. They're gardeners. Gardeners? Think about it. A gardener doesn't destroy the plants that grow in the wrong place. They carefully transplant them. They prune branches that grow too wild. They nurture the soil so that everything can grow properly. HFY stood up, pacing around the observation chamber. Humans don't wage war to destroy their enemies. They wage war to reshape the galaxy according to their vision of how things should be. The implications were staggering. Every military theorist in the galaxy had focused on human aggression. Their famous battle cry of "Remember the Alamo" and their tendency to fight to the last soldier. But what if that was missing the point entirely? What if human mercy was actually a sign of their supreme confidence in their own power? A species that could afford to be merciful to its enemies was a species that never truly felt threatened by them. 3 days after his initial observations, Dr. HFY received an unexpected transmission. The message came through official Galactic Council channels, bearing the diplomatic seal of the Terran Federation. His heart skipped several beats as he realized what this meant. The humans knew they were being watched. Professor HFY, the hologram of a human female, materialized in his laboratory. She appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair and kind eyes that somehow managed to convey both warmth and steel. My name is Ambassador Sarah Chen. I understand you've been conducting research on human military operations. HFY's throat sacs inflated nervously. Being caught spying on a species known for their military prowess was not how he'd planned to spend his retirement years. Ambassador, I can explain. No explanation needed, Chen interrupted with a gentle smile. We're actually quite pleased with your work. Your analysis of our tactical approaches has been remarkably insightful. We'd like to invite you to observe our operations more directly. I beg your pardon. We have a situation developing in the Vega system that we believe would provide excellent research opportunities. A slaver operation has been terrorizing the outer colonies, and we're preparing to intervene. Would you be interested in joining our observation team? HFY's multiple eyes blinked in rapid succession. This was unprecedented. No military force in the galaxy invited foreign researchers to observe their operations, especially not sensitive anti-slavery missions. You want me to watch you conduct a raid on slavers? Among other things, yes. I think you'll find our approach educational. 2 weeks later, HFY found himself aboard the human vessel Compassionate Thunder, a name that struck him as distinctly oxymoronic. The ship itself was a marvel of engineering, its hull sleek and obviously built for speed rather than intimidation. Unlike the brutally angular designs favored by most military species, human warships had an almost organic quality to them. Captain Maria Santos greeted him personally as he came aboard. She was younger than the ambassador, with short-cropped black hair and calloused hands that spoke of practical experience. Welcome aboard, Professor. I hope you'll find this educational. Captain, may I ask why you're allowing me to observe this operation? Surely your tactical procedures are classified. Santos led him through corridors that were surprisingly spacious and well-lit. Because we want you to understand what we're really about. The galaxy seems to think we're bloodthirsty warmongers, and that's not entirely accurate. They passed groups of human soldiers preparing for the mission ahead. HFY expected to see warriors psyching themselves up for battle, perhaps engaging in ritual combat dances or weapon displays. Instead, he observed something far more unsettling. The humans were quiet, methodical. They checked and rechecked their equipment with the precision of medical technicians. Their weapons were clearly designed for non-lethal engagement. Stun rifles, gas dispensers, riot foam projectors. Captain, where are your plasma cannons? Your kinetic bombardment systems? We have them, Santos replied casually. But we won't need them for this operation. The slaver compound has approximately 200 criminals and nearly 3,000 captives from various species. Our objective is to extract the prisoners safely and neutralize the threat without unnecessary casualties. But surely the slavers will resist. They're known to fight to the death rather than face galactic justice. Santos smiled, and there was something predatory in that expression that made HFY's exoskeleton shiver. Oh, they'll resist initially. But we've found that most criminals are surprisingly reasonable once they understand their situation properly. The ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vega system. Through the observation deck's massive viewport, HFY could see the slaver facility, a converted asteroid mining station bristling with defensive weapons. It looked impregnable. How do you plan to approach without being destroyed? HFY asked. Watch and learn, Santos replied. Instead of attacking the station directly, the human fleet spread out in a wide formation and began broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple and delivered in multiple languages. Attention, criminal elements. You have 15 minutes to surrender your captives and submit to galactic authority. This is your only warning. The slavers' response was predictable, a barrage of plasma fire that lit up space around the human ships. But the humans had positioned themselves just outside effective range, their shields easily absorbing the weakened shots. They didn't return fire immediately. Instead, something far more terrifying happened. The human ships began transmitting detailed information about every person aboard the slaver station. Names, personal histories, family members, criminal records, even dietary preferences. The voice of Admiral Patricia Wong came across all channels, calm and professional. Crex Valdor, we know you joined the slaver operation to pay for your daughter's medical treatment on Rigel 7th. She's been cured and is asking about you. Zath Morganson, your brother on Centauri Prime, thinks you died in a mining accident 5 years ago. He named his son after you. The psychological impact was immediate. HFY watched as the slaver station's defensive fire became sporadic, then ceased entirely. These criminals had thought they were anonymous, forgotten by the galaxy. Discovering that the humans knew everything about them, including details about their families, shattered their confidence completely. How did you gather such detailed intelligence? HFY whispered. We've been tracking this operation for months, Santos explained. Every person who enters the criminal underworld leaves traces. We follow those traces not to punish their families, but to understand who these people really are underneath their crimes. But why share that information with them? Because most criminals aren't evil, Professor. They're desperate or hurt or convinced they have no other choice. Once they realize we see them as people rather than targets, they often make better decisions. As if to prove her point, the station's communications array activated. A gruff voice came across the channel. Human ships, this is Station Commander Valdor. We want to discuss terms. Terms are simple, Admiral Wong responded. Release all captives immediately, surrender your weapons, and submit to transport to the nearest Federation rehabilitation facility. In exchange, we guarantee safe passage for all personnel, and will work to arrange family reunification where appropriate. Rehabilitation facility? Valdor sounded confused. That's right. We're not here to execute you or throw you into prison forever. We're here to help you find better ways to solve your problems. HFY felt his worldview shifting like tectonic plates. This wasn't warfare as he understood it. This was something entirely new, a form of conflict resolution that assumed the possibility of redemption, even for the worst criminals. The surrender of the slaver station took less than an hour. HFY watched in fascination as human boarding parties moved through the facility with the precision of a surgical team. They weren't conquering the station, they were liberating it. The first priority was medical care for the captives. Human medics, accompanied by specialists from a dozen different species, began treating injuries and trauma with an efficiency that bordered on miraculous. HFY observed a human doctor named Martinez working on a wounded Altarian child, his hands gentle despite their obvious strength. The interesting thing about humans, Captain Santos said, noticing his attention, is that we evolved as social creatures. We instinctively want to help others, even those who aren't our own species. It causes us physical discomfort to see unnecessary suffering. But you're still predators, HFY observed. Your evolutionary history shows clear predatory adaptations. Cooperative hunters, Santos corrected. There's a difference. We didn't evolve to kill for pleasure or dominance. We evolved to work together to solve problems. Sometimes those problems happen to be other predators. They moved deeper into the station, where HFY witnessed something that would haunt his research for years to come. In what had once been the facility's command center, Admiral Wong was conducting interviews with the former slavers. Not interrogations, interviews. "Tell me about your family, Mr. Valdor," Wong said gently to the station commander. She sat across from him at a simple table. No restraints, no weapons visible. "I understand your daughter was diagnosed with Rigelian bone fever?" Valdor, a massive Corvan with scarred hide and cybernetic implants, looked confused by the question. "Yes, The treatment was expensive, more than I could make legitimately. The Federation has new treatment protocols that are 90% more effective and completely free of charge," Wong explained. "We could have her transferred to a Federation medical facility within the week." "Why would you do that?" "I'm a criminal." Wong leaned forward slightly. "You're a father who made desperate choices to save his child. There's a difference." HFY watched as the massive alien began to weep. In all his years of research, he'd never seen such a rapid transformation. This Corvan had been prepared to die fighting against the human assault team. Now he was discussing rehabilitation programs and family therapy. "How do you do this?" HFY asked Santos quietly. "How do you turn enemies into allies so quickly?" "We listen to them," Santos replied simply. "Most conflicts in the galaxy start because someone feels unheard, unimportant, or desperate. Once you address those underlying issues, the conflict often resolves itself." They moved to another section where human social workers were processing the liberated captives. Each rescued individual was being treated not as a victim to be pitied, but as a person whose autonomy had been violated and needed to be restored. The humans were offering transportation home, medical care, counseling services, even job placement assistance. A young Veltari female, barely out of adolescence, was speaking with a human counselor named Dr. Jennifer Kim. "I don't know how to go back," the girl was saying. "My family probably thinks I'm dead. And after what happened here..." "Healing takes time," Dr. Kim replied gently. "But you're stronger than you think. Would you like us to contact your family, or would you prefer to do it yourself when you're ready? You'd really let me choose?" "Of course. This is your life we're talking about. Every decision from here forward should be yours to make." HFY noticed that the human didn't make false promises about forgetting the trauma, or pretending it never happened. Instead, she offered practical support and respected the victim's agency. It was a remarkably sophisticated approach to post-traumatic care. Later, in the station's former prison block, HFY encountered the most disturbing aspect of human mercy. The slavers had kept their captives in conditions that violated every galactic standard for the treatment of sentient beings. Cramped cells, inadequate food, poor sanitation. It was the kind of environment that would drive most species to thoughts of revenge. But the humans cleaning out these cells worked with quiet professionalism. They documented everything for legal proceedings, but showed no signs of anger or disgust. When HFY asked Marine Sergeant Collins about this, the human's response chilled him. "Getting angry won't help anyone," Collins said, carefully photographing evidence of maltreatment. "These people need justice, not revenge. Justice means making sure this never happens again. Revenge just creates more victims." "But doesn't this make you furious, the way these innocents were treated?" Collins paused in his documentation, and for a moment HFY saw something dangerous flicker in the human's eyes. "Oh, it makes me furious, Professor. Absolutely furious. But my fury makes me more determined to do this right, not to do it fast." That evening, as the human fleet prepared to depart with their rescued captives and surrendered criminals, HFY found himself in the ship's observation lounge with Captain Santos. Through the viewport, he could see the slaver station being converted into a Federation monitoring post. Within days, it would become a safe harbor for ships traveling through this dangerous region of space. "I don't understand your species," HFY admitted. "Every other predator race I've studied uses fear and violence to maintain dominance. You use compassion and understanding. It shouldn't work." "But it does work," Santos pointed out. "We ended this threat without losing a single life, including the lives of our enemies. The captives are free. The criminals are getting help instead of execution, and this region of space is now safer for everyone. How is that not more effective than traditional warfare? Because it requires an enormous amount of resources and time. It would be much simpler to simply destroy threats when you encounter them. Santos smiled, and once again Zexai saw that predatory glint that reminded him what species he was dealing with. Professor, we could have destroyed that station and everyone on it within minutes of arriving. Our weapons are more than capable of that level of destruction. But what would we have learned? How would that have prevented the next slaver operation, or the next one after that? So your mercy is actually a form of intelligence gathering? Our mercy is a form of civilization building, Santos corrected. Every person we save instead of killing. Every enemy we rehabilitate instead of executing. Every problem we solve instead of destroying. All of that makes the galaxy a little bit better, a little bit safer, a little bit more civilized. Zexai stared out at the stars, his mind reeling from the implications. Humanity wasn't just a military power. They were a transformative force. They didn't conquer territories. They converted them. They didn't defeat enemies. They reformed them. It was conquest through kindness, imperialism through empathy. And it was absolutely terrifying. Dr. Zexai's research took an unexpected turn when the Galactic Council demanded a formal presentation of his findings. 3 months after his experience aboard the Compassionate Thunder, he found himself standing before representatives of 47 different species in the Grand Assembly Hall on Nexus Prime. The hall was a masterwork of engineering, designed to accommodate the wildly different environmental needs of the galaxy's diverse civilizations. Aquatic species floated in pressurized tanks while silicon-based life forms rested on heated crystalline platforms. The air itself was a carefully balanced mixture that could sustain most carbon-based attendees. Honored representatives, Zexai began, his voice amplified by the chamber's translation matrix. My research into human military behavior has revealed patterns that fundamentally challenge our understanding of warfare and predator psychology. The hegemony representative, a towering chronarch named General Thex, leaned forward aggressively. Are you suggesting that human mercy makes them more dangerous than their fury? That seems contradictory. Precisely because it seems contradictory, General. It represents a tactical advantage we've consistently underestimated. Zexai activated the holographic display system, showing footage from the Vega station operation. Observe how the humans neutralized a heavily fortified position without firing a single lethal shot. The assembled representatives watched in silence as the footage played out. Several species were known for their military prowess. The warrior culture of the Mandorians, the hive mind efficiency of the Zix Collective, the technological superiority of the Ethereal Syndicate. But none of them had ever achieved such complete victory with such minimal force. This is propaganda, declared Ambassador Kith of the Raider clans. No military force operates with such restraint during actual combat. That's exactly my point, Zexai replied. What we're seeing isn't restraint, it's supreme confidence. A species only shows mercy when it's absolutely certain of its ability to enforce that mercy. He brought up a new display showing human population and military statistics. The Terran Federation has a total military force of approximately 50 million active personnel. This represents less than 1% of their total population. By contrast, the Mandorian Empire maintains 12% of its population in military service, while the Hegemony Coalition maintains nearly 8%. Numbers mean nothing without context, General Thex growled. Our warriors train from birth for combat. And yet, Zexai continued calmly, human forces have achieved decisive victories against opponents with numerical superiority, technological advantages, and extensive combat experience. The question is how? The answer, he'd discovered, lay in human psychology itself. During his extended research, he'd interviewed hundreds of human military personnel, civilians, and even former criminals who'd undergone Federation rehabilitation programs. The pattern that emerged was unlike anything he'd encountered in 40 years of xenobiological research. Humans possess what they call empathy, Zexai explained. This is more than simple pack loyalty or species identification. They can literally understand the emotional states of other beings, even those completely unlike themselves. This allows them to predict behavior, identify motivations, and find solutions that address underlying problems rather than merely treating symptoms. He showed footage of human peacekeepers working in contested territories throughout the galaxy. In every case, they'd succeeded in reducing conflict not through superior firepower, but by identifying what each side actually wanted and finding ways to provide it without harming anyone else. "This is impossible," declared the ethereal syndicate representative, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. "Empathy is a weakness. It leads to hesitation, to suboptimal decision-making, to the protection of inferior genetic lines." "Does it?" HFY challenged. "Let's examine the results empirically." The next display showed territorial expansion rates across the galaxy over the past century. The data was startling. While traditional military powers had maintained or even lost territory through constant warfare, human-influenced space had expanded dramatically. More importantly, regions that came under human protection showed increased trade, reduced piracy, improved health outcomes, and higher birth rates among all species. "They're not conquering territories," HFY explained. "They're improving them. Every world that allies with the Federation becomes more prosperous, more stable, and more attractive to other potential allies. It's conquest through enhancement rather than domination." The Veltari representative, her tentacles weaving complex patterns of confusion, spoke up. "But what about species that resist? Surely there are limits to human patience?" HFY's expression darkened. This was the most disturbing aspect of his research. "I was granted access to classified Federation records regarding species that have repeatedly rejected diplomatic overtures and continued aggressive actions against civilian populations." The hologram shifted to show the fate of the Crimson Tide, a notorious pirate organization that had terrorized trade routes for decades. They'd refused every offer of amnesty, executed captured Federation diplomats, and continued raiding civilian convoys even after multiple warnings. "The humans eliminated the Crimson Tide as an organization within 72 hours, HFY reported. "Total casualties, 0. How is that possible?" demanded General Thex. "The Tide had over 10,000 active personnel and a fleet of capital ships." "The humans didn't kill them," HFY explained. "They integrated them. Every member of the organization was individually analyzed, their psychological profiles determined, and customized rehabilitation programs developed. The leadership was offered positions in the Federation military, where their tactical expertise could be used constructively. The rank and file were provided with education, job training, and opportunities for legitimate advancement. And they accepted? They had no choice. The humans had so thoroughly infiltrated their organization that they knew about planned operations before the pirates themselves did. They could have destroyed the Tide at any time, but instead they waited until they developed individual solutions for every single member. When they finally acted, they didn't destroy the organization, they transformed it. The silence in the chamber was profound. What HFY was describing wasn't warfare. It was social engineering on an unprecedented scale. "This is why human mercy is more dangerous than their fury," he continued. "When humans become angry, they fight until the immediate threat is neutralized. But when they show mercy, they're demonstrating that they've already won so completely that they can afford to rehabilitate their enemies rather than destroy them." The implications were staggering. A species that could convert its enemies into allies wasn't just militarily superior. It was evolutionarily transcendent. Every conflict made them stronger by adding new perspectives, skills, and resources to their civilization. "What do you recommend?" asked the council president, an ancient being whose species had survived multiple galactic wars through careful neutrality. HFY looked around the chamber at the representatives of dozens of proud civilizations, many of which had built their identities around military prowess or cultural superiority. His next words would likely end his career, but his scientific integrity demanded honesty. "I recommend we stop viewing humanity as just another military power and start recognizing them as the galaxy's dominant evolutionary force. Every species in this chamber will eventually face a choice: adapt to human standards of civilization, or be gently but inexorably transformed into something that can." The aftermath of HFY's presentation to the Galactic Council was swift and predictable. Within hours, 3 different species had lodged formal complaints about his pro-human bias, while 2 others demanded he be investigated for possible collusion with Federation intelligence services. The Hegemony Coalition went further, classifying him as a security threat and banning him from their territory. But there was one reaction HFY hadn't anticipated. A private communication from the Altarian High Command, requesting his immediate presence on their homeworld for what they termed urgent consultation regarding human threat assessment. The Altarians were one of the galaxy's oldest civilizations, having achieved interstellar travel when humans were still discovering fire. Their society was built around philosophical contemplation and strategic patience. If they were concerned about humanity, it meant something significant was developing. HFY arrived on Altair Prime 3 days later, his transport ship escorted by sleek Altarian interceptors through the system's elaborate defense grid. The planet itself was a testament to millennia of careful cultivation, floating cities connected by graceful bridges, vast libraries that stretched beyond the horizon, meditation gardens where beings could spend decades in quiet reflection. High philosopher Zentari met him personally at the spaceport, an honor typically reserved for heads of state. The ancient Altarian skin had the translucent quality that came with extreme age, and his large eyes held wisdom accumulated over 8 centuries of life. "Dr. HFY," Zentari said in perfect galactic common, "thank you for coming. We have a situation that requires your unique expertise." They traveled through the city in a whisper-quiet transport pod, gliding between buildings that seemed to grow organically from the landscape. HFY noticed defensive installations hidden among the artistic spires, subtle, but clearly designed to repel invasion forces. "High philosopher, may I ask what specific situation requires my consultation? Your message mentioned human threat assessment, but the Federation has never shown aggression toward Altarian territory." "That's precisely the problem," Zentari replied enigmatically. They arrived at the Strategic Analysis Complex, a building that managed to be both beautiful and fortress-like. Inside, HFY was introduced to a dozen of the galaxy's most brilliant military theorists, strategists, and xenopsychologists. The group included representatives from species that rarely cooperated with each other, all united by a common concern. "Dr. HFY," began General Kyrex of the Mandorian War Council, "we've analyzed your research extensively. If your conclusions are correct, we're facing an unprecedented threat to galactic sovereignty." "Threat might be too strong a word," interjected Dr. Vash, a crystalline whose light patterns indicated deep analytical thought. "Perhaps evolutionary pressure would be more accurate." The room's central holographic display activated, showing a map of the galaxy with human-influenced territories marked in blue. Over the past 50 years, that blue had spread like a benign infection, growing not through conquest but through attraction. Worlds that came under human protection prospered. Civilizations that adopted human diplomatic methods found their conflicts resolving peacefully. "The pattern is undeniable," said Admiral Keth of the Void Runners. "Everywhere humans establish significant presence, local warfare decreases, trade increases, and civilian quality of life improves dramatically. It's like they're terraforming entire regions of space for peace." "But is that necessarily bad?" asked Dr. HFY, genuinely curious. "If human influence creates more prosperous, stable societies, why resist it?" The room fell silent. Finally, Zentari spoke with the weight of 8 centuries behind his words. "Because it means the end of diversity of thought, Doctor. Humans don't just influence behavior. They influence values, ethics, and fundamental approaches to existence. Species that fall under prolonged human influence begin to think like humans, act like humans, and eventually become indistinguishable from humans in all but biology." The implications hit HFY like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on human military efficiency that he'd missed the larger picture. Humanity wasn't just spreading their territory, they were spreading their worldview. And that worldview was proving so attractive, so successful, that other species were voluntarily adopting it. "Show the cultural analysis data," he requested quietly. The holographic display shifted to show psychological profiles of various species before and after prolonged contact with humanity. The changes were subtle but consistent. Aggressive species became more diplomatic. Hierarchical societies developed more egalitarian structures. Isolationist cultures opened themselves to interspecies cooperation. The Vorthek were renowned as the galaxy's finest hunters, Dr. Vash noted, her crystalline form flickering with concern. After 20 years of Federation partnership, Their young people are more interested in conservation biology than predation. The Grimm Collective once prioritized efficiency above all else. Now they spend resources on art therapy programs. These aren't negative changes, Zexai protested. These societies are becoming healthier, more sustainable, more human, General Carex interrupted. That's the point. Humanity isn't conquering the galaxy through force. They're converting it through example. Every species that adopts their methods becomes more like them, until eventually, there will be no meaningful diversity left in galactic civilization. Admiral Keth activated another display, showing projected demographic trends. At current rates of cultural adoption within 3 centuries, every major civilization in the galaxy will operate according to human ethical frameworks, use human-style diplomatic protocols, and structure their societies around human values. Physical diversity will remain, but cognitive and cultural diversity will be extinct. The room's atmosphere was heavy with implications none of them wanted to voice. Zexai realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a gathering of the galaxy's most independent civilizations, united by fear of becoming too successful, too peaceful, too human. There's another aspect to consider, said Dr. Thys, a reptilian strategist from the Outer Rim territories. Our intelligence networks have detected something disturbing about human population growth and expansion patterns. A new hologram appeared, showing human demographic data over the past century. The numbers were staggering. Not only were human populations growing rapidly, but they were actively encouraging immigration from other species. More importantly, the children of mixed human-alien relationships consistently exhibited enhanced cognitive abilities and emotional intelligence. They're not just converting our cultures, Dr. Thys continued. They're integrating our genetic advantages into their own population. Human-Altarian hybrids show enhanced longevity and philosophical reasoning. Human Mandorian crosses exhibit improved physical coordination and tactical thinking. Human crystalline offspring can process multiple data streams simultaneously. Selective breeding? General Kyrex asked, his warrior instincts immediately recognizing a potential threat. Not breeding, Centauri corrected grimly. Evolution. Humans aren't trying to eliminate other species. They're trying to incorporate the best traits of every species into a single, unified galactic civilization, with themselves at the center. Zexai felt his worldview shifting again. What he'd interpreted as mercy and compassion might actually be the most sophisticated form of imperialism ever conceived. Humans weren't conquering the galaxy through force because they didn't need to. They were making themselves so attractive as allies, so beneficial as partners, and so successful as role models that other species were voluntarily surrendering their independence. "What do you want from me?" he asked finally. "Verification," Admiral Keth replied. "We need to know if this is conscious policy or unconscious instinct. Are humans deliberately orchestrating the transformation of galactic civilization, or are they simply being themselves and accidentally remaking the galaxy in their image?" "And if it's deliberate?" The silence stretched uncomfortably long before Zentari answered. "Then we need to decide whether the survival of our individual cultural identities is worth resisting the most benevolent conquest in galactic history." Dr. Zex's High looked around the room at representatives of species that had survived ice ages, stellar wars, and cosmic catastrophes. Each had developed unique approaches to existence, distinctive philosophies, and irreplaceable perspectives on the universe. If human influence continued to spread, all of that diversity might be lost, not through destruction, but through voluntary abandonment in favor of human methods that simply worked better. "I'll need access to human strategic planning documents," he said finally. "Real access, not the sanitized reports they share publicly. If this is deliberate policy, there will be evidence." "Agreed," Zentari said. "But be careful, Doctor. If humans are as psychologically sophisticated as your research suggests, they'll know you're investigating them. And if they're truly committed to their vision of galactic unity, they might decide that your inquiry represents a threat to be neutralized. Through violence?" The ancient Altarian's laugh was bitter. "Through conversion. They'll convince you that their way is better, that resistance." Dr. Zexai's investigation into human strategic planning took him to Earth itself, a privilege rarely granted to non-Federation researchers. As his transport descended through the planet's atmosphere, he marveled at what he saw below. The cradle of humanity had been transformed into something that resembled a vast garden, more than a military headquarters. Cities flowed organically across the landscape, their architecture incorporating elements from dozens of different species. Crystalline spires that would make an ethereal weep with joy stood alongside Mandorian-inspired fortress districts and Altarian meditation complexes. It wasn't cultural appropriation. It was cultural integration on a scale that should have been impossible. His guide was Dr. Elena Vasquez, the director of interspecies relations, a human woman whose office overlooked the Geneva spaceport. She greeted him with the same warm professionalism he'd encountered throughout his research, but Zexhai now understood that this might be calculated rather than genuine. Dr. Zexhai, welcome to Earth. I understand you're interested in our long-term strategic planning processes? Among other things, he replied carefully. I'm particularly interested in how the Federation develops policies regarding cultural exchange and diplomatic integration. Dr. Vasquez smiled, and once again, Zexhai saw that predatory glint that reminded him what species he was dealing with. I think you'll find our approach refreshingly transparent. Would you like to start with our Philosophical Integration Council? The pick turned out to be exactly what its name suggested, a group of the galaxy's most brilliant thinkers, representing dozens of species, working together to synthesize the best ideas from across known space. The council chambers were a marvel of adaptive architecture, with environmental controls that could accommodate any known form of life. Our mandate is simple, explained Council Chairman Dr. Robert Kim, a human whose colleagues included an Altarian philosopher, a crystalline logician, and a Vorthak ethicist. We identify practices, beliefs, and social structures that demonstrably improve quality of life, and we develop frameworks for implementing them across diverse cultures. And if a culture resists these improvements? Zexhai asked. Then we study why, replied the Altarian representative philosopher Talneth. Usually resistance stems from misunderstanding, fear of change, or practical implementation challenges. We work to address those concerns. But what if a culture simply prefers its traditional ways, even if they're less efficient or beneficial? The crystalline member, Dr. Prism, flickered with what Zexhai had learned to recognize as amusement. That's like asking what if someone prefers disease to health or starvation to abundance. Cultural practices that cause suffering or limit potential aren't preserved traditions. They're problems to be solved. The casual dismissal of cultural autonomy was breathtaking in its implications. These beings representing the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had convinced themselves that their way was not just better, but objectively correct. They weren't destroying other cultures, they were curing them of inefficiency. Dr. Vasquez led him to another facility, the Cultural Adaptation Research Center, where teams of sociologists studied how to implement beneficial changes in resistant societies. The methods were sophisticated beyond anything Zexhai had imagined. We start with economic incentives, explained Dr. Sarah Chen, whom he recognized as the ambassador who had first contacted him. Trade partnerships that reward adoption of improved practices. Then we introduce educational exchanges, allowing young people from traditional societies to experience the benefits of our methods firsthand. And if that doesn't work, we wait, said Dr. Michael Torres, the center's chief strategist. Eventually, every society faces challenges that their traditional methods can't solve. When that happens, we're ready with proven alternatives. The key is patience. How much patience? Generations if necessary. We're not in a hurry. Human civilization thinks in centuries, not years. That evening, Zexhai found himself in his assigned quarters, reviewing classified documents that Dr. Vasquez had provided with surprising openness. The files contained strategic projections going back over 2 centuries, detailing humanity's gradual expansion not through conquest, but through what they termed civilizational magnetism. The documents were terrifyingly comprehensive. Human planners had identified every major galactic civilization, analyzed their strengths and weaknesses, and developed specific approaches for integration. The Mandorians would be attracted by opportunities to apply their warrior skills to humanitarian causes. The Altarians would appreciate philosophical frameworks that incorporated their meditative traditions. The crystallines would be drawn to logical systems that demonstrated clear efficiency improvements. But it was the section on cultural preservation protocols that truly chilled him. Humans hadn't forgotten about diversity, they were actively managing it. Like curators in a cosmic museum, They were deciding which aspects of each culture were worth preserving and which were obstacles to progress. A soft chime indicated someone requesting entry to his quarters. Dr. Vasquez stood in the corridor, carrying a bottle of what appeared to be Altarian meditation wine. "I thought you might have questions," she said, settling into a chair across from his desk. "The files can be overwhelming on first reading." "This is all deliberate," Zexai said. "It wasn't a question. Of course it's deliberate. Did you think we stumbled into galactic leadership by accident?" She poured 2 glasses of the wine, its bioluminescent properties creating soft patterns in the liquid. "Every species eventually faces the same choice: grow beyond their limitations or be surpassed by those who do. But you're eliminating cultural diversity. We're eliminating cultural dysfunction," she corrected. "Slavery, warfare, oppression, suffering. These aren't cultural treasures to be preserved. They're problems to be solved. And who decides what constitutes dysfunction?" Dr. Vasquez smiled, and her expression was genuinely sad. "The universe decides, Dr. Zexai. Cultures that create suffering collapse eventually. Cultures that promote flourishing survive and spread. We're just accelerating a natural process. By making yourselves irresistible. By making beneficial change irresistible. If other species had developed better systems, we'd be adopting their methods instead." Zexai sipped the wine, feeling its calming effects beginning to work on his nervous system. "What happens to species that refuse integration entirely?" "They get left behind," she said simply. "Not destroyed, not conquered, just irrelevant. Like a village that refuses to build roads while the rest of the world develops transportation networks. Eventually, they become isolated curiosities rather than active participants in galactic civilization." "And you're comfortable with that?" "I'm comfortable with survival of the fittest applied to ideas instead of individuals. Better that good ideas spread and bad ones fade away than the reverse." As Dr. Vasquez left his quarters, Zexai realized that his investigation had revealed something far more disturbing than he'd expected. Humanity wasn't just spreading their influence. They were conducting the largest social engineering experiment in galactic history, and they were doing it with the sincere belief that they were saving the galaxy from itself. The most terrifying part was that they might be right. 6 months after his investigation on Earth, Dr. Zexai stood once again before the Galactic Council. But this time the chamber was different. Representatives from the Hegemony Coalition were notably absent, as were delegates from 3 other traditionally militaristic species. In their place sat new faces, younger beings who spoke of cooperation rather than conquest, of integration rather than domination. The change had been subtle but inexorable. While Zexai had been researching human strategic methods, those methods had continued their work across the galaxy. The Crimson Nebula incident had been resolved through human mediation. The Outer Rim famine had been alleviated by Federation aid programs. The Crystalline Collective had adopted human-style consensus democracy after seeing its effectiveness in their joint research projects. "Honored representatives," Zexai began, his voice heavy with the weight of his conclusions, "I have completed my investigation into human strategic methodologies. What I discovered challenges our fundamental understanding of power, influence, and the nature of civilization itself." He activated the chamber's holographic display, showing the galaxy as it had existed 50 years ago, a chaotic patchwork of competing empires, constant warfare and isolated civilizations struggling for survival. Then he showed the galaxy as it existed today, still diverse in biology and technology, but increasingly unified in values and methods. "Humanity has achieved something unprecedented in galactic history," he continued. "They have created a form of cultural imperialism so sophisticated, so beneficial to its subjects, that resistance appears not just futile, but actively harmful to one's own interests." The Altarian representative, now a younger philosopher named Keth Annie, who had studied at Federation universities, leaned forward with interest. "Dr. Zexai, are you suggesting that human influence is inherently coercive?" "I'm suggesting that it transcends the traditional concept of coercion," Zexai replied. "When compliance with another's vision improves your quality of life, expands your opportunities, and enhances your civilization's prospects for survival, is resistance to that vision rational or self-destructive?" He brought up data showing measurable improvements in every metric of civilizational health: reduced warfare, increased trade, enhanced technological development, improved health outcomes, rising birth rates, extended lifespans. Every species that had adopted human methodologies had seen dramatic improvements across all categories. The question we must answer, HFY said, is whether this represents liberation or assimilation. Are humans freeing us from our limitations, or are they transforming us into versions of themselves? General Vix of the Mandorian Empire, a significantly smaller empire than it had been a decade earlier, spoke up. Does the distinction matter if the results are beneficial? Our traditional warrior culture produced excellent fighters but terrible farmers, mediocre scientists, and dysfunctional societies. Adopting human agricultural techniques, educational systems, and social structures has made us stronger, not weaker. But are you still Mandorian? HFY asked pointedly. The question hung in the air like a challenge. General Vix considered it carefully before responding. We still possess the physical attributes that made us formidable warriors. We still value courage, honor, and excellence. But we've learned to apply these values constructively rather than destructively. Are we different from our ancestors? Yes. Are we diminished? Absolutely not. Dr. Prism of the Crystalline Collective flickered with analytical patterns. The doctor raises important questions about cultural autonomy, but his analysis may be based on false assumptions about the nature of culture itself. Culture is not static. It evolves, adapts, and improves over time. The question is whether that evolution is guided by rational principles or random chance. And you believe human principles are rational? I believe human principles are demonstrably effective, Prism replied. Logic does not care about sentiment or tradition. It cares about results. HFY realized that he was witnessing the completion of humanity's greatest achievement. These beings weren't being forced to accept human methods. They were choosing them because those methods worked better than their alternatives. The transformation was voluntary, rational, and arguably beneficial, but it was still transformation. I want to share with you the most disturbing document I encountered during my research, HFY said, activating a new display. It's from the Human Strategic Planning Archive dated nearly 3 centuries ago. The hologram showed an ancient text written when humanity was still confined to their home system. The document outlined humanity's long-term vision for galactic civilization, a vision that matched almost exactly what was happening today. They planned this, HFY said quietly. Not the specific events, but the general pattern. They understood, even before they met us, that their methods would be attractive to other species. They knew that given enough time and exposure, most rational beings would choose human approaches over their traditional alternatives. Are you suggesting this is some form of conspiracy? Asked the council president. I'm suggesting it's evolution, HFY replied. Not biological evolution, but cultural evolution. Humans have developed social technologies so advanced that they represent the next stage of civilizational development. Contact with humanity doesn't just influence other species, it upgrades them. The chamber was silent as the implications sank in. What HFY was describing wasn't conquest or conversion, it was metamorphosis. Humanity wasn't forcing change on other species. They were catalyzing a transformation that other species ultimately wanted. So what do you recommend? The council president asked finally. HFY looked around the chamber at beings who represented dozens of species, hundreds of worlds, and thousands of years of diverse cultural development. But increasingly they all thought in similar patterns, used similar methods, and pursued similar goals. The diversity was becoming cosmetic rather than fundamental. I recommend we acknowledge what's happening and make a conscious choice about it, he said. Humanity's mercy is indeed more dangerous than their fury, because it's impossible to resist without appearing irrational, self-destructive, or cruel. They've created a form of soft power so attractive that rejection seems like madness. And your personal choice? HFY considered the question carefully. He thought about his own research, his growing appreciation for human methods, his increasing tendency to analyze problems using frameworks he'd learned from human scholars. The transformation was already happening to him, had been happening since his first encounter with human military operations. My choice, he said finally, is to stop fighting an evolution that appears to be both inevitable and beneficial. If humanity represents the next stage of galactic civilization, then perhaps our energy is better spent ensuring that transformation preserves What's truly valuable about our diversity rather than simply preserving diversity for its own sake. As the session ended and representatives began filing out of the chamber, HFY realized that his investigation had come full circle. He'd set out to study human fury and discovered their mercy. He'd tried to analyze their mercy and discovered their vision. And in the end, he'd found himself converted not by force or manipulation, but by the simple recognition that some ideas are so good that resistance to them becomes its own form of violence. The galaxy was changing, one act of kindness at a time. And perhaps, HFY thought as he watched beings from across known space cooperating in ways their ancestors could never have imagined, that wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. The age of human influence wasn't ending galactic diversity, it was beginning galactic unity. And for the first time in millions of years of cosmic history, that unity was being built not on conquest or domination, but on the radical idea that different species could choose to become something better together than they had ever been apart. In the end, that might be humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy. Not just their mercy, not just their methods, but their vision of what civilization could become when powered by compassion rather than competition. And that vision, HFY realized, was worth becoming human for.